The first step in setting up Califia is to attach the power supply. You'll notice that the connector has a little notch in it, and that goes down. The receptacle has the part that plugs right in there, and you give it a slight turn. The other thing is the power supply has its own power cord that needs to be attached. The next thing that we'll do is to attach the Ethernet cable. The Ethernet cable, of course, has a catch that's on the downside of this connector and goes straight in and clicks. Lastly, then, we'll go ahead and turn Califia on. There are three cables that we're using to attach to the monitor. The first one is the HDMI cable. Although we can use other video formats, the HDMI is the one that supports all of Califia's functionality. The second cable is the USB. The USB cable is actually the one that transmits the touch information from this monitor back to the computer. And lastly, I always hook up the power supply last, just out of habit. So we're going to set the laptop monitor up. Turn it around like so. Printer setup. Well, there's basically two connections that we make to the printer. First one is the USB cable. That connects to the computer, obviously, and the second one is the power supply. This also has a key in it, and there's a notch in the receptacle. It's important to get them lined up, and it goes in. The last part of setting up the printer is loading the paper. In this case, the gray button opens it. We're going to put the paper in this orientation. A key is that it's all the way down. When we go ahead and power up this thing, then we can see that the button to turn it on in front we can feed the paper, everything is good, we're ready to go. In this particular computer we have a dongle which utilizes a USB C type port. Put that right in there, and then the last connection, of course, is going to be the power supply, like that. Now the computer's ready to go. The next step is to turn the computer on. We want to make sure that all of these peripherals are powered up. Computer gets powered up last. The first step in connecting Califia to the ECMO machine is we take the standard connectors that come with it in the big valves, and we like to establish a couple of variations of a pigtail that might attach. So part of this thing is to put a tie wrap on there, make it really, really secure. What these allow us to do is then clamp later on and use these things quite frequently. This picture of the back end of Califia shows the various connections. These large quick disconnects are labeled venous and arterial. These smaller ones above, cardioplegia and vent. Now you saw the connections that goes in these, simply pushing in like that. One thing to notice about these, or to make note of, is the fact that these are not valved. These will definitely leak if there's any water behind them. On this side we have a little bit of a different situation. This is the drain connection. This connection does have a valve in it and won't be leaking at all until we put in the connector. The connector opens that, allows it to drain. It's basically just set right here for storage. Drain for overflow. Many times we'll put a 1/2-inch connector on that. We're not going to do that today. We talked about making these quick disconnects. We're going to go ahead and put those in right now. We've got the venous and the arterial. For priming, we're going to go ahead and put clamps on those so that we can prevent those from leaking. Since these, again, do not have a valve, what we do in basic ECMO application is to just make a little pigtail. That once we're at this point, oh, the other thing that we wanted to talk about a little bit was the presence of this heart pump. We'll get back to that later, but for now, these are all the elements that we need to consider for hooking up to an ECMO machine and getting it primed. What we're going to do now is we're going to fill Califia with our overfilled. And we're going to shoot for 12. And I might go ahead and stop here and kind of look and point out the fact that the CVP now is starting to respond to this filling. As I put more and more fluid into Califia, the CVP rises. I'm going to be shooting for something close to 12. This might actually be just the right amount of water, to tell you the truth. So now I'm going to be very close to 12 centimeters of water, and you'll also notice that the other screen is also showing the volume that's in Califia. What we're going to do now is prime the heart pump. One of the things that we'll notice is that there's a top on it that has to come down. I like to push the edges of the tube back and and cock the pump in this way. Once that's down, then we're going to go ahead and turn on the pump, which gets it going. And what it's going to do now, pump some water through and prime itself in this way. So we're going to let it go until all the air seems to be out. It might not be real fast, but just let it go, and eventually all that air will disappear.